Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this Penguin Talk from Penguin, the UK's biggest publisher. If whilst we're talking you have any burning questions that you want to ask, you can submit these in the Ask a Question box, and make sure you stay until the end because we will be answering these questions as well as providing a free extract from Adrienne's audiobook, The Power Hour. My name is Alice Living. I am a personal trainer, best-selling author of 3 books, a blogger and influencer, as well as writing for many publications such as Vogue and Elle, as well as a regular column for Women's Health magazine. And my guest today is the wonderful Adrienne Herbert, who is a leading wellness professional, a TEDx speaker, coach, podcast host, mother, and all-round voice of inspiration, encouragement, and motivation. Across her incredibly successful and varied career, where she regularly hosts live events and panel discussions, she has also partnered with a range of brands, including Adidas, Origins, Virgin Sport, Google, and Apple, and has been named a new face of wellness by British Vogue. Adrienne, how are you doing?
Wow, what an introduction. I'm doing really well. Thanks, Alice.
Good. Now we're here to talk about motivation, and you have also just released your book, The Power Hour, which is something I just finished listening to and absolutely loved. I found it so motivating. So I want to try and harness all of that into this discussion today. And I wanted to start by asking you about the name of your book, Power Hour. Your book and podcast have the same name. For those who might not be familiar with what the Power Hour is or your work, could you explain what the Power Hour is?
Sure, yes. So the concept of the Power Hour is all about reclaiming the first hour of your day. And I say reclaiming intentionally because it's about reclaiming, it's about being intentional and taking back some of our time. I think that now there are so many demands on our time from the moment we open our eyes in the morning until we go to bed at night, whether that's social media, emails, WhatsApp messages, kids. There's so many different demands on us. And I think that actually being able to have starting your day with intention, doing something for yourself in that first hour, whatever it is that you choose. I talk about lots of different things in the book that you can do in your first hour, in your power hour. But I believe that it sets the tone for the rest of the day, and that we can then go into our day, we can create a life that we love, and we can focus on our goals and actually take steps to making things happen. So yeah, that's the Power Hour in a nutshell.
Now, I'm a complete convert. I love getting up early, and I do think that first hour of the day is so crucial to, like you said, setting the tone for the day. But you really stipulate in the book that it has to be the first hour of every day. Why is that so important?
Yeah, so I don't necessarily dictate the time, but I do, as you say, believe that it should be early if possible, and should be the first hour for lots of reasons. But I guess, if we do things before the day starts, we then have a chance, we have an opportunity throughout the day to look out for the things that we want, or to do the things and to make those things happen, and to influence those decisions and those actions, everything from our daily habits to the behaviors that we want. Whereas if we do it later in the day, after lunch, late in the day, before bed, often people will say to me, oh, I love the concept, but I don't want to get up early, so can I just do it in the evening? And I guess, the principles apply whenever you can create this time free from distraction to focus. But I definitely think it's harder. I think later on in the day, it's much harder to have, time free from distraction. I think that the way the world is set up, once people are awake, we know that, we're connected all the time, which can be great, but it makes it much harder because we feel that sense of, being available actually, and a sense of obligation on our time. So I think making it the first hour, there's probably less likely to be distractions. You're probably less likely to I'll do it later. You just get it done first thing in the morning, and it does. Honestly, it has such a positive impact. I know you're a morning person, so but I think for people that kind of say, oh, you know what, I really just don't know if the morning thing is for me, then maybe they need to start a little smaller initially. Maybe start with 15 minutes, 20 minutes, then make it half an hour, and just like wind the clock back slowly but surely. And actually, this is a great time to do it because we're entering into spring, so the mornings are starting to get a bit lighter, the air's getting a bit warmer. So I do think that, it's a good time to start if you're new to early mornings.
Well, I think it's encouraging to hear that it doesn't have to be super early, because I think we've probably got a lot of teenagers who are watching. And I know when I was a teenager, early mornings were not my thing. But I think the fact that it is that first hour of the day and really carving that out for yourself, setting some goals, making sure that you start the day on a positive note, that's all really positive stuff that we can be doing. And I guess that's much easier when, you know, we've got things to look forward to. I mean, pre-COVID, getting out of bed was fairly easy for me because I loved my job and I had loads of things to get out of bed for. But I guess at a time when our lives are so incredibly limited, how can we still be motivated to get out of bed and set a positive tone for the day? What are some of the things that you're doing?
Yeah, you know what? Such a great question, Alice. And I think the situation, you know, how it's been in lockdown for so many young people, having, as you described, you know, the structures taken away, maybe they don't have to go to a specific place at a specific time. And it's very understandable that you could wake up and feel like, you know what, I don't need to get out of bed right now. Actually, I could stay in bed for 3 hours and watch TV or look at my phone. And it's easy. I think once something becomes a habit, it becomes your new normal, it can be really, really hard, especially right now, to think, actually, how do I make those changes? And as you said, motivation, that question just comes up for me again and again and again. So firstly, I'd say that knowing that about the situation and knowing that when there's uncertainty, when we lack structure, it is harder for us to feel motivated. So knowing that and accepting that and saying, okay, what can I do about it? Maybe adding in a little bit of structure for yourself. It doesn't have to be every hour of every day. You know, the power hour is just 1 hour, but actually saying, having some steps in place, maybe 3 things that you do every morning when you first wake up, that's actually going to really help you to then, you know, to boost your energy, to get other things done, because you know where to start. So there's less feeling of, you know, overwhelm and choice of like, well, I don't know what to do. So I'd say if you are listening to this and thinking, that is me, I am not motivated right now to get up and do anything, then, you know, start small, but pick something. And also, you know, I talk about focus on your goals. A goal doesn't have to be a big, you know, huge thing. A goal could be a small thing. So today I'm going to do this week I'm going to do this month I'm going to do this. And having those small, you know, breaking those goals down. And if you think about, for example, you know, we both work in fitness and we both, you know, talk about exercise and movement. Think about it in that way. It's why people like signing up to challenges or to races, is because there's those small steps to working towards a bigger goal. So yeah, I think start small and try, if you can, to do it every day, even if it's, like I said, not an hour to start with, because that daily repetition is not only going to make it more consistent, but it's going to, yeah, give you a structure every morning so that when you wake up, you know what the reason is and you know what the first thing is to do on your list.
Yeah, completely. I think structure is so crucial, and also just feeling anchored to stuff. You know, previously my stuff was, you know, having things in my diary. I had a meeting then, I had this then. And once you lose all of that, it's sort of really hard to create any sort of structure. So I think I really can relate to that, just finding some structure, even if it's really small stuff, and also setting goals. And one of my favorite parts of your book, and something that I'm really trying to work on at the moment, is where you discuss this idea of a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. I think it's such an empowering concept, and one that we can all kind of learn from and harness to our benefit. And I think I'd love to hear from you, really explaining what a fixed mindset and a growth mindset mean, and how we can all try and foster a growth mindset.
Yes, absolutely. So to break it down quite simply, a fixed mindset is when you believe that the circumstances that you have, the skills, the ability, that certain things about you and about your life are cemented and they are fixed. So, you know, when people say that you kind of, these are the cards that you've been dealt and that's all you can do with it, and that's that, and it's limited. And believing that the framework or the parameter that you have is limited. Whereas if you develop a growth mindset, then you always believe that everything can improve, you can adapt, you can change, you can learn, you look for opportunities for improvement, you can learn a new skill, you can take action, and that you feel a sense of, as you use the word empowering, you feel a sense of agency, actually, to say, I can impact this, I can impact that. Now, often when I talk to people about fixed and growth mindset, they'll say, well, you know, is this a personality thing? Is it nature? Is it nurture? Maybe you're just born an optimist. Maybe you're just a go-getter, or maybe some people are, you know, it's just not natural to them. But what Carol Dweck does, Dr. Carol Dweck, in her fantastic book Mindset, she breaks it down and also discusses the science behind this and what it really means to develop a growth mindset. And the bottom line basically is that it's possible for all of us. If you think about really simple things like learning to ride a bike, learning to tie your shoelaces, learning to drive a car, these are all things you weren't born knowing how to do, but through practice, repetition, and intention, you've learned to do them, and then they become autonomous, so you can do them more easily. So that's a really simple way of thinking about it. But if you do develop a growth mindset, and if you're committed to thinking, okay, how can I learn from this situation? What can I do to take action? What can I do to make change? It kind of gives you this empowered sense of individual agency, of saying, you know what, it's not, your life is not something that you're just gonna, you just have to, that happens to you, but actually something that you actively participate in. And I think that's a really empowering thing to think about in that way, and think, actually, what can I do? Again, I would say this, but today, this week, this month, this year, to take me where I want to go.
Yeah, and I absolutely love that. And there's definitely been occasions in my life where I felt challenged by something, and my initial mindset is to go, oh, I can't do this, or, I'm going to give up because this is not my thing, clearly. And actually, one of the things that you also talk about is addressing those thoughts. Our thoughts aren't facts. They're things that come into our head and they go. And the fact that you can take that thought and say, I'm going to question this. Actually, why are you saying you can't do it? What's holding you back? And to really try and foster that growth mindset by questioning those negative thoughts and saying, well, how can I change this around to be a positive thing? I think that's such a really useful tool to have, because there are always going to be times in our lives where we are challenged by things that are difficult. Life's never easy. And so it's always good to try and have moments where you are able to check yourself and see how you can overcome them. Now, many of the students watching will be in quite a transformative stage of their life. I know when I was sort of going from that teenage to adult stage, it's a really challenging time, and there are so many things that you go through that are quite difficult. Your background is incredibly inspiring. I loved reading about it in the book and hearing more about how you grew up. And you came from quite a challenging upbringing to really achieving your dreams, in terms of going into the West End and performing on a stage when you didn't have much training at all. Can you share some advice on how you manage this as a young adult? Like, take yourself back and sort of see what were some of the things that you think you put in place as a young adult to really transition from being a child to going through those things and coming out the other side?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's a great question, because I definitely agree that transitional time is so incredibly challenging without a global pandemic. So, I think for young people right now, I can only imagine that there's so much change and so much uncertainty. It's really, really difficult. And we're human beings. We are not robots. So accepting that this is a challenging time, I think is really important that we all do that. But when you said about, growing up, I guess, looking back on it now, I grew up in a single parent household, a low income household. And yeah, you're right. I had very big ambition, and I kind of, looking back in retrospect, you could say, I made it happen, and I moved to London, and I, had these dreams that I wanted to achieve, and I was able to do them, and it was really, really great. But when I think back to how I did it, I think it was definitely an element of resilience, an element of being willing to try and fail and try and fail and try again, and not really worrying too much. Maybe it's different now. There was no social media then, so I didn't really think about others' perception of me, or other people's, I guess, perceived limitations of me as well. My teachers at school, or people who maybe didn't expect me to be able to achieve those goals, or who maybe thought, oh, you're young and naive and you don't know. And maybe I was young and naive. Maybe that's a good thing, because I've always had this relentless, I guess, belief and fostered a confidence in myself through action. It's not a confidence that I was born with. I'm one of an oldest out of my siblings. And so I think I definitely took on the role of like, come on, like, we can do this. I can do this. I'll figure it out. How am I going to do that? I'll figure that out. How am I going to do that? And then it gave me a confidence to do that in other areas of my life. So again, I know we're probably going to talk a bit about exercise, movement, fitness, and what we both work in that space. But I think that's, again, something I've seen, is that if you don't have the initial confidence or self-belief to think, what, I have that goal as well, but I don't believe that it's possible. Sometimes we learn something in one area of our life and we can take it to somewhere else. For example, not being able to run 5K, not being able to lift that weight, not being able to doing it again and again and again until you achieve, and then you go, hang on, I never thought I could do that, and I did. So what else don't I think that I can do? And I mentioned, teachers, or maybe it's friends, maybe it's parents, whoever, who sometimes when you are a young person and you think people don't necessarily believe that you can achieve your potential or your goals, and it's a real shame, but never, ever, ever let anyone define what is possible for your life and what you can achieve, because nobody knows. Nobody. Trust me, speaking from experience, the potential that you have, if someone else can't see it because it's not possible for them, doesn't mean it's not possible for you.
Yes. Can I harness that? Can I get it on a quote on my wall? I love that. You touched on something which I actually wasn't going to ask about, but you have talked about it. So I think it's a really poignant time to talk about failure, the concept of failure. I failed and have failed many, many times in my life. And when I was growing up, one of the biggest bits of advice I think I wish someone had given me was failure is a positive thing. We are taught growing up, you fail an exam, it's awful. You fail at getting into a team, it's awful. You fail getting into a favorite club or whatever it is, it's awful. And actually harnessing the power of failure has been something that I've learned later in life, which has really, really helped me to develop as a person and to understand that these are things that happen to help us move forward rather than hold us back. Can you talk about this, that idea of failure and how, you mentioned in your book, you failed at a marathon, which is such a huge thing. And reading about that, I could really feel your frustration and sadness at doing that. But at the same time, the lessons that you learned from that situation were so valuable, not just in marathon running, but in your life, that actually it's a really good kind of example of where failure can be such a positive thing. And I wonder if you could just expand on that.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, and you know what? I think failure and the idea that failure is a lesson and all of those things I think we're hearing that a lot more now, you're right, than say, when we were at school but I still feel like there's this element of we don't naturally want to fail, and it still hurts when we fail, and it still feels, we still, again, I talk about we're human and the human condition, we have an ego, and that can be knocked in our confidence when we fail. So although people might say it's great to fail, it still hurts, and it's still, nobody wants that. And when you talk then about the marathon, so that was the Berlin Marathon, it was my second marathon, and I had a foot injury, and like you say, you can read about it in the book, but I feel like that was a real lesson in actually, again, I talk about perception, but it was ego. It was, what are other people going to think? What are other people going to, I'm so embarrassed. I remember saying the words, I felt embarrassed. But in hindsight, it's ridiculous, because, you can be an Olympic athlete and get an injury. It's just life, and there's no embarrassment. You shouldn't feel embarrassed. And what I learned actually was that when I then shared that what had happened that day and that week and that month, and people's reactions, nobody's reaction was, I should never have felt embarrassed, because actually the reality is that training for a marathon is tough. Standing at the start line of a marathon is tough. It takes courage to do those things. And that's what I apply. You said about the lesson, that lesson, I've applied that so many more times in my life to think, what, Adrienne, doing this takes courage. Doing that takes courage. And I just remind myself of that. And to anyone listening, to say, what, if you are taking on something new, whether you're studying for something, starting your own project, whatever it is, it does take courage to do it. And, you might fail, and it's fine, and it might hurt, and it might be, you might feel embarrassed, you might feel those things, but you will survive. It won't, you'll survive, you'll carry on. And I guess when it comes to failure, actually, I probably challenge myself more now, later on in my career, to say, Adrienne, if you're not failing at anything right now, or if there's no chance of failure here, then you're not aiming big enough, you're not dreaming big enough, you're not daring to leap, you're just doing what you know you can do, and there's no growth there at all.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I think that's such an important thing. And you're right, we can't pretend that failure doesn't hurt. It's painful, it bruises our ego, but also it can be something that you're able to reflect on with hindsight usually, and move forward in a positive way, or take a lesson from it. Now we're going to move on to exercise, because it's an area that you and I both work in. It's February, it's actually raining right now where I am. It's dark and it's cold outside. What is motivating you to move right now?
Okay, great question. So, I mean, I certainly don't need to tell you, Alice, about the long list of benefits when it comes to exercise and movement. And, you know, I think when you're a young person as well, sometimes people saying to you that, you know, exercise is good for sleep, and exercise is good for regulating your hormones. And you kind of go, oh, whatever, like, you know, but it doesn't necessarily feel like enough to make you, you know, take it seriously or take action. So there's two things to it. One is that, you know, the pandemic itself has taught us how valuable and how important our health is, like never before. And so I think, if nothing else, leaning into that movement and exercise is going to, yes, it's good for our health, yes, it's good for our mental health as well as our physical health, but just that it is so important that we not take it seriously, not just when you're old, or not just when, you know, but actually that you, kind of think longer term, and kind of, I guess, the idea of future proofing your body and giving yourself the best optimum chance to live a healthy, well life. Because if you feel good, and you know, everyone wants to feel good. So I think that's something to bear in mind. But also when it comes to what I touched on before around progression, around having a goal, around having a motivation, exercise and movement can be that thing that you set yourself a challenge. You can really see progress. It's a visible, tangible thing to say, I couldn't do that, and now I can. And that is just something that if there's only one thing that people take from exercise or movement, I think it's that trying something, especially right now, like you said, it's February, the weather might be rubbish, you might not have loads of things on and things to do. So if you can, do something in the house, but just knowing that, having steps to follow and going, what could I do if I did this every day for 30 days, for 10 days, whatever, what could I potentially be able to achieve? And that just, right now it's hard to have things to achieve. So I think it's a good place to start.
Yeah. And I love the idea that, like, our bodies are, you know, very clever, and that if you stick to something and you're consistent with it, you will get better. I mean, when I first started doing any form of exercise, I was terrible. I was someone who was never on a sports team at school. I couldn't run. I couldn't play any of the ball sports or whatever. But when I discovered my thing, it was like, okay, if I stick at this, I might not be great right now, but I enjoy it. If I stick at it, I will get better. And I think sometimes that's what people need to be reminded of, is like, it feels hard at first, but you will always get better. Running is a huge part of your life. You speak about it a lot in the book, and it's incredibly inspiring what you've done with your running journey. What is it about running that you love, and can anyone watching do it?
Yes, well, firstly, absolutely. If you stand on the start line of a race, a marathon, whatever, you will see all shapes, sizes, ages, abilities, ethnicities, you name it. If you move your one foot in front of the other, forward motion, you're a runner. Doesn't matter how far or how fast. And I have, embraced running over the last 9 years. It's become a huge part of my life, a part of my identity, essentially. And there's, what do I love about running? I could just talk about it all day, but I think one is the sense of solitude, and the sense that, like being by myself, because I'm a very social person. I love to be with others, but it's, and I'm a mother. So, I think having time just for myself and just being on my own is something that I love about running. Flipping that on its head, actually connecting, and knowing that, connecting with other people, whether it's a running group, whether it's a club, whether it's one person training for a race together, the buzz, at the start line of a race when there's 10,000 runners and you're all running in the same direction, something about that kind of group and that movement, that forward motion, that just energizes me. And then lastly, I'd say that it's just, again, when I talk a lot already today about this idea of achieving things that you couldn't do. It's proving to yourself, forget about prove to other people or showing, other people what you can do. I think running is a constant conversation with yourself about what you can do that day, what you can do, because sometimes you'll think, gosh, how did I run a marathon, when you're out doing a 10K and it feels tough, and you think, how did I actually do that? But knowing that there's natural ebbs and flows in life, there's variation, I think running really reflects that for me.
Yeah, and there's stuff that, you spoke earlier about being able to take lessons that you've learned from doing exercise, for example, and apply those to other areas of your life. And I think there's something about running, and you use the phrase in your book, being comfortable with being uncomfortable, which I think is a really important term, and something that I've applied across my whole entire life. We said earlier, but there are going to be times in your life where you feel uncomfortable or you feel challenged by things that are thrown at you. And actually, if you can apply that kind of mindset of, well, I found running really hard, but I managed to do the distance that I wanted to do and I got through it. That kind of ability to overcome uncomfortable feelings is a really positive one. Do you think we can all benefit from being a little bit uncomfortable at times?
Oh, absolutely. And I think also who hasn't? I think sometimes when we think about ourselves and think, oh, maybe this thing makes me nervous or that thing, knowing that everyone else feels that too. So for example, I brought out the book, but if I think about my favorite authors, and they probably feel when they bring out a book, knowing that we all feel that feeling of uncomfortable. We all feel nervous when we do things. It's not just, once people achieve superstar status in one thing, thinking that they no longer feel discomfort or nervousness. And actually, when you said then about phrases in the book, I thought you were actually going to say around I think it's in the same chapter when I talk about you can do hard things.
Yeah.
Mantra, which I definitely took from experience in running to other areas of my life. And, the way I described that, you can do hard things, is that accepting something is hard. You might find it hard when you first start, and actually you might always find it hard, but knowing that you can do it anyway is what really empowers me. So it's, for example, if that is running a race, don't think just because you've done a marathon before, I've done it before, it's easy now. It's still going to be hard. Or having maybe a challenging conversation with someone, or presenting if you're a nervous speaker, or taking an exam, whatever the thing is that you find difficult, not expecting it to be easy, or to say, oh, once I've done this, I won't find it hard anymore. You might always find it hard, but knowing that you can do hard things means you can still keep doing it. So that is a mantra that I take, that I use probably on a daily basis. I think I don't have any tattoos, but if I did, maybe that's where I'd start.
It's one that I use as well. If I'm having a challenging day, and you talk about this as well, the power of words, and we're going to come on to this, but saying those things to yourself out loud, I can do hard things, almost convincing yourself that you can, I think is really positive. Keeping on the subject of exercise, there are going to be some people watching, I'm sure, who have probably never done, a proper run or any sort of kind of proper exercise apart from like team sports and stuff. I mean, that was definitely me when I was at school. So if someone's never really done something or stuck to it, maybe they don't really like exercise, how can they incorporate movement into their life, knowing that it's really good for us, but with that kind of mindset of, well, I'm not really motivated to do anything?
Yeah, well, firstly, finding something that you actually do enjoy. So if it's dance, if it's yoga, if it's swimming, running, finding something you enjoy first of all, because if someone says to you, do this, and it's something you just really doesn't, if running is not your thing and you just don't ever want to do it, then forcing yourself to do that isn't going to be fun, and you're probably not going to stick with it very long. So try and find the way of moving that you actually enjoy. Then figure out if you're more like, I know right now it's much more difficult with restrictions, but thinking longer term as well, are you someone who you want that solitude and you want to do it on your own and you can persevere by yourself, or are you someone who needs that accountability of a friend and saying, right, we're going to train together for a race, or even if it's just during lockdown, whether it's via a virtual class, or like having that accountability of knowing, like you said, we're going to do it at this time, see you there, even if it's virtual, I think can help people to stick to it and not think, oh, I'll do it tomorrow.
Yeah, completely. And I think, never think that just because you're not, like, this is one of the things that I wish someone had told me, but just because you're not good at like team sports at school, that's not the only exercise that exists in the world. So for me, for example, I was never on any teams. I was terrible at sports, and I kind of wrote myself off as therefore just not being good at exercise. And I think actually when you do find something that you then enjoy, it's like, oh my God, I actually like this. It doesn't have to be awful and hard work. It can actually be really fun and challenging, but really fun as well and rewarding. So yeah, I think that's a really good mindset to be in. I know that I personally found elements of school really challenging, and it was thanks to like a few key people that I felt able to ask for help and seek guidance when I needed it. In terms of motivation, we know that it's not always going to be there. And I think there are always going to be those kind of little cheerleaders that you actually need in your life to kind of bring you along and to help you along the way. You talked in your book about how some goals simply can't be achieved alone. And I think it's important to remember that. But how do you know when to ask for help? And is this something that we should all be doing a bit more?
Yeah, okay, great. There's a couple of things then that I was thinking about as you were talking, especially when you said about, at school, you kind of put yourself in that box, oh, I'm not sporty. And then now coming on to, this question about, doing things together and asking for help. And I think sometimes we put ourselves, or other people maybe put us in a box of you're academic or you're not. you're sporty or you're not. And so for me, reflecting back on school and thinking, actually, maybe I wasn't told by others that I was, academic, or I didn't necessarily feel like I excelled in a certain environment. But actually reflecting now, I'm a voracious learner because I've found a learning style that works for me. So I think if you're struggling with study, if you're struggling with anything, then yes, definitely ask for help. But what you might need to do as well is think about yourself, the way that you learn, we're talking a lot about motivation, but what is your motive is going to be very different to somebody else's, and what helps you to stay engaged with the topic or with your work. So I think definitely, yes, reach out, ask for help, look for different resources, different ways of learning, because it might be that actually you engage better with audio content or with video content. So is there a way you can download the books that you need to listen to if you're finding it challenging to sit and read them? Or is there some way that you can have, I don't know whether it's one-to-one via video, but asking and saying, you know what, this way isn't really working for me, not feeling ashamed about that, and saying that is, that you're failing, or that you're not committed, and saying, no, I'm really committed to learning and to improving and to making this, again, growth mindset. I'm taking action, but this is working and I need help, and I need someone to, maybe a different approach could unlock so much for you. Because honestly, now I said, I am a voracious learner and now love to read, but I listen to audiobooks, and I probably listen to a book a week on Audible. Now, if I'd have been able to do that back at school, it would have been so different for me. So find a way, ask for help, and be willing to adapt your learning.
Yeah, and also just like the power of people, it's really important who you have around you. If you've got people saying you can't do this or you can't do that, no wonder your brain is going to be like, oh, well, I'll give up then. Whereas if you've got people around you who are sort of supportive and who listen to what it is that you actually require, that can be the most life-changing kind of environment in which you can then feel empowered to achieve whatever it is you've got to do. So I think, that's a really good piece of advice. We all have had big projects in our life that make us a little bit nervous. You mentioned a presentation, you mentioned, maybe it's a big sport event, whatever it is. When you've got a big project on or something that you really need to focus on, what are your motivation non-negotiables?
Great. So motivation non-negotiables, if I'm working on a project, I'd say deadlines and false deadlines. So if you're someone who you feel like, some people thrive under pressure at the last minute. So they'll say, oh, you know what, I'll put it off. And then they do this cramming at the end. And I think when you look at psychometric testing, there's actually a reason in our brains of why we do these things. And sometimes it can be to do with optimism or past experience, but whatever it is, sometimes we do this and we leave it to the last minute. So I find it really helpful to add in a false deadline. So you make yourself believe that the deadline is actually a week before, so that then if that happens, you've got that extra buffer of time. So that's one that I work with. Another one is just eliminating distractions, because I'm such an easily distracted person. My son is exactly the same, and I'm homeschooling him, so I can see it in him. And I had to, for example, when I was writing the book, I had to eliminate distractions. My phone would be upstairs. I'd sit in quiet because I can't, if there's anything audible, if there's any sound, I'm listening to that. So I had to be in isolation. And I think finding, again, put yourself in an environment that works for you so that you can succeed. If if you're really honest with yourself, and you know that you're trying to study and you're checking YouTube and you're checking Instagram and you're messaging someone, literally those 10-minute interruptions, it's so anti-productive that actually, even though it sounds so obvious to be like, put your phone in another room, you have to almost police yourself and be like, right, I'm doing 40 minutes of that, then I can go and check my phone, then come back 40 minutes more, then you can go and check your phone, and you'll get so much more work done that actually you'll probably finish earlier and have more free time.
Completely. We're going to move to questions. We have some questions in the chat box, so I'm really looking forward to asking these. They've come in from people who are watching. The first one is, how do you deal with procrastination?
Oh, okay, great question. Procrastination. I could definitely give you some top tips if you want to know how to procrastinate and more things to do to put things off. But to deal with it, I'd say make a list if you're a list maker. And if your list is 20 things long, forget it. It's too much. You're not going to get it all done. So just highlight the 3 things that are, you know, non-negotiable, the things that you have to get done. It might be one personal, one professional, one health, but just 3 things, just 3. And try to just make sure that those are done first. After those 3 things are done, then come to everything else. So if you're procrastinating, putting it off, it could either be because it's something that, as we touched on before, you need actually to ask for help with and support. Maybe you're struggling to engage with it. Or it might be that you're putting it off because it's just something that we don't like and we don't want to do it, but you can do hard things. So just get those 3 things done first and then move on.
Completely. Next question is really surrounding sort of mental health and mental well-being during this time, and trying to maintain motivation when there are so many you know, moving factors in our lives at the moment, and stuff that's also completely out of our control, which I think is the really challenging part. How are you sort of supporting your mental health? How are you keeping anxious thoughts and feelings under control? And how are you dealing with sort of the constant lockdown changes as well?
Yeah, brilliant question. So a couple of things that I do, I know that mindful practices are super, super important, but because I am someone who thrives in motion and in action and in doing, I do find it quite challenging to just, the idea of just sit and do nothing and just be calm. It's not my natural thing. So what I do instead is I use prompts and guides. So for example, I do the 6 questions to answer before 6 exercise, which is in my book. And it's basically just a journaling, you know, you can take a blank piece of paper or a book and you answer some questions to give you prompts. For example, what's the energy that I need to have today? Or who would love to hear from me today? Or what am I most grateful for today? And I just answer those questions. So that's a really like cathartic way of having intention and mindfulness, but also it really forces my attention to be focused and to be present. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is doing guided meditations. So again, as I said, if you're not someone who can just sit and do nothing, and if anything, that for some people can just lead to like more catastrophizing thoughts because we're just alone with our thoughts. So guided meditations can be great. And there's lots of free apps, and there's lots of apps that you can download that will give really short, like 5 or 10 minute guided meditations. So yeah, I do think it's incredibly important that we all, you know, try and factor in time to do things that are going to support our mental health. And the last part of the question about how are you managing, you know, the uncertainty and the changes is a really, really great one, because Alice, we're both the same, you know, we want to do and plan, and knowing that you can't do that is frustrating and it can be difficult. So what I'd say about that is, again, with mindfulness practices, I like to do like visualization, and I will think about, okay, I can't do these things right now, but this lockdown will not last forever. Fortunately, God willing, it won't. So I like to do visualizations of something this week, something this month, and something this year. And it really energizes me whenever I do that exercise. And I just really think, I did it when I was running, actually. I was thinking about one thing this year and just visualizing it, and almost like, I can't experience it right now, but I can, yeah, visualize it to the point where it gives me more energy.
Yeah, I think that's such a nice idea. And yeah, it's we are people who generally thrive off having something to look forward to, and when that's completely taken away, it's hard to sort of have those milestones of being like, well, what's next? But I think you can try and just visualize stuff that you're looking forward to. That's kind of a way of being able to put those positive actions in place. A lot of people are asking about how to get up in the morning if they struggle to get up early. Now, I know this is a subject that you and I are slight experts on. I think my alarm goes off at 5:30. I don't know what time yours goes. Yours 5, isn't it? 5:30. Yeah, so we both get up at the same time. So for people that do struggle to get up early, who are often late, how can they break this cycle? What are some of your top tips to getting up early?
Yes, well, the first one, well, 2, sleep to win. When people tell me they can't get up early, the first question I ask them is, what time do you go to bed? And no one wants to hear it because it sounds boring, like, oh, go to bed early, turn off your phone, stop watching Netflix. But the reality is, you cannot get up early and feel good. And as I talked about before, everyone wants to feel good. When you have energy and you feel good, you can channel that into whatever you want. Training, friends, whatever it is, but you can't give what you don't have. So please get to bed early if you want to get up early. But then number 2 is forget the snooze and forget having an alarm on your phone, because the phone is going to suck you in and your attention's going to go straight to it. So just get an alarm. You can order one online, I'm probably sure today, and it'll be with you very soon. And just doesn't have to be expensive. You can spend £5 on a little alarm so that when your alarm goes off, You get up out of bed, you turn off that alarm, and that is it. You are up. There is no such thing as a snooze button, because for lots of reasons, but like mentally, physically, like it doesn't help you in any of those, either mentally or physically, to kind of go back into a temporary sleep. So yes, get to bed early. I know it's not probably what people want to hear, but if you want to start having a power hour, start the night before.
Yeah, and I think, really harnessing the fact that sleep is our superpower. It's really, you and I both work in the health and wellness industry, and we generally typically see health as being the food we eat and the exercise we do. But the missing kind of massive jigsaw puzzle of that for me is sleep. Sleep is crucial to our hormonal regulation, to our moods, to our cognitive function. It's linked to so many things. And actually, if we have poor sleep, the impact on our bodies is much greater than you actually probably realize. And I think that, like, when you're a teenager, which I remember quite well, as feeling like sleep was quite uncool. It was a bit of like a chore. You were like, for God's sakes. And you sort of wanted to stay up late, kind of trying to think of sleep being your superpower, and particularly at a time when people are experiencing anxiety and, feeling as though their mental health is suffering slightly, knowing that sleep is a crucial part of that is also really important. Another question that has come in: do you feel there is a societal pressure on us to exhaust ourselves to the point of burnout in hustle culture? You talk about this in your book, so I know you're an expert on this. Should we be resting as discussed?
Absolutely. Yes, yes, and yes. I think that there is a societal culture. I think it's actually shifting, I think, with this kind of conversation around mental health and burnout. But I think before, there was definitely this idea of, celebrating busyness and like, look how much I can do, and I'm doing this and this and this and this, and achieve more and do more, and cram more things in and just add to the list. And actually that, that's the only way that you will, as you said, hustle culture, the only way that you'll kind of carve out a space and get to the top, when actually in reality, as you just described, all of the list of things that benefit us when we are well rested and when we're sleeping. Ultimately, when it comes down to optimizing and high performance and all these things that help us to achieve, all of those things are underpinned by rest and by sleep. You can only train, for example, as hard as you can recover. You can only do the things that you want to do with energy and with motivation when you feel good. And so I've been saying a lot this year that, I don't want to use the word busy. I've banned it, and I don't want anyone else to use that word when they say to me, oh, Adrienne, thanks so much for this or that. I know how busy you are. I'm like, no, I'm not, because actually busyness isn't something to be celebrated either, or a badge of honor of like, look how busy I am. To me, actually, busyness just means poor time planning. It means you're trying to do too many things. You're probably diluting the quality of what you can do. So I absolutely do think that if you feel that pressure of, well, I'm supposed to be doing this and this and this and this, then again, it comes back to, like I was talking about, perception. Actually, it takes time to build that confidence to say, no, this is what I'm working on right now. And this is a season. Everything has seasons, from the weather, life, everything. And it might be your season right now of study, or maybe you're at the start of something. That's the season. And later it'll be something else. But it doesn't have to be everything all at once.
Yeah, and you kind of mentioned it earlier, actually, when you said, your list of 3, don't have 20 things on the list and be super busy, because actually, like you said, it's diluting the quality of what you're able to then do. And also that feeling of overwhelm when you're like, I've got so much to do, I don't know where to start. If you focus small, much easier to get stuff done. The next question is around students limiting their online distractions when trying to focus on doing schoolwork remotely. I'm sure this is a massive challenge right now. In particular, I guess, learning to ignore their phone. Have you got any tips?
Absolutely. I actually mentor 2 young people, and this has been my challenge with them since the start of this year, every week when I speak to them, because, and I'm sure a lot of people on this call can probably go, yeah, that's me too. They stay on their phones and they watch YouTube and things like that until 1 or 2 a.m. every night. And then they wonder why, well, not wonder, but they find it hard, to study and to get up and to get focused in the morning. But then when that night comes around again, they're back doing it because their friends are online, and that's when they, connect, and it's important stay connected during this time. So it is a real struggle. And I think that if you cannot, listening to us talk, if you're thinking this all sounds great, but there's absolutely no way that I am going to turn off my phone and go to bed early every night. Maybe it's not every night, but could you do it once this week and see how you feel as a result? Could you do it twice? Could you just pick, and then build it up so that maybe weekdays or Monday to Wednesday, whatever it is, there's a little bit of time where you really set that boundary and see what impact it has. See if you feel, how's your mental health the next day or the next few days? How's your energy levels? How's your mood? How's your ability to concentrate? So if you start small and try and just do it once or twice, then hopefully when you feel good, you're going to go, okay, you know what, I'm feeling good. I want to keep this feeling, keep doing it more. Instead of me just saying, you know what, everyone turn off your phone at 9 p.m. Like, as if.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that you and I both have experience of, as I guess we're both working in online spaces, we spend a lot of time on social media, and that's where some of our careers have really flourished. But I guess social media also feeds into this idea that there's this comparison culture of being like, well, she's working and she's put up that she's done 5 hours of something and I've only done 1, and this idea that we're somehow always pitting ourselves against each other because we're having a window into so many people's lives that we didn't have before. And I actually think that's one of the most problematic things. So one of the things that I would say, which I think you've really touched on as well, is not feeling as though you need to be seeing what everyone else is doing, and actually be a bit more tunnel visioned about your journey, your life, what it is you have to do. Don't worry about what everyone else is doing. Just focus on your kind of your goals, and maybe try and just limit the amount that you view other people's stuff. Moving on, we have a couple of last questions. We've only got 5 minutes left, but following on from your answer of getting up early, lots of students are asking, what time do they have to go to sleep in order to feel refreshed?
Well, again, it's very individual because the sleep science says between 7 to 9 hours a night. So it depends on what time you want to get up, and it also depends on yourself and where you are in your cycle for women and all these different things. But also in adolescence, you are still growing, and your cognitive function takes a lot of energy. So I'd say between 7 to 9 hours is optimum according to the sleep science when it comes to sleep. But it is definitely individual. So you have to kind of trial and error it. Maybe if you want to, if you're a list maker, as I said before, maybe do a bit of a sleep journal. Don't kind of go crazy on it in terms of the detail and how many minutes and stuff like that, but just maybe a bit of a sleep journal. Because sometimes that's when we look back over 1 or 2 weeks. That sometimes is when people really see, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to bed that late. I'm getting this many hours. And over time, sometimes you just see it in black and white to realize.
It's a really, really good tip. We're going to move into our final question now. If you had advice for what you want students to take away from this talk, in particular those struggling with their mental and physical health through this lockdown, what would it be? Sort of your key take-homes.
Okay, my key take-homes would be, don't underestimate how big an impact one small change could have. So whether that is first hour of your day, whether that is doing a walk around the block or doing an exercise virtual class, just one thing. So pick one thing and try and give that a go in the next 7 days. So that would be the first thing. And then the second thing that I would say is to, I think as we've just talked about it so much, is to try to prioritize that sleep. Try to avoid your digital, your tech distractions, because they are there. They will always be there to tempt us, but it is so important for us to feel good with sleep. And then number 3, my third and final takeaway would be that I mentioned about seasons. This lockdown season will end. And as much as it's so difficult sometimes when we feel the monotony of every day is the same, I can't be bothered, it's going to end. So what is something that you are really looking forward to, something that you want to do post-lockdown? Is there something you could be doing today, this week, this month, to just take a little bit of a step towards that? Is there a book you could read, a podcast you could watch, someone you could reach out to via email? Is there something small, big, whatever, that you could do now so that when we get the green light, when it's go time, we are ready to go?
I absolutely love that. Adrienne, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking your time to chat to us today. I just wanted to say all students should get a feedback form in the survey link below, which they should try and fill out. And I think in doing so, you get a free segment of Adrienne's audiobook. Your book is called The Power Hour. If anyone wants to get it, it's available in all bookstores. And I think that's everything. So thank you so much again, Adrienne. I really appreciate your time and your wisdom today. It's been great. If anyone else wants to find you, I guess you're on social media, of course. And I think that is it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Alice, and thanks everyone for joining.
Thanks, everyone.